that reasonable? Deb, can you hear that reasonably? Okay. All right. We live? Good. All right. Good evening, everyone. If we could start with a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Here.
Mrs. Boer? Here. Mrs. Davis? Here. Mrs. Thomas? Here. Mr. Swaggart?
Here. We want to start on with the topics for discussion. If everyone had a chance to read that. I didn't receive any questions back, so I'm assuming everyone has. It was on the resolution. Okay. I don't know if we wanted to read that into the record or if we just leave it on the resolution, board resolution.
Did you want to take action on the resolution this evening?
I think
or
I think
some
we want to
wording
discuss
changes
it.
maybe?
Yeah, want to discuss it a little bit. Yep.
Yes.
Why don't you read it in so that people know?
Yeah, we were going to discuss it and then we'll vote on it at probably the next meeting if we words. But the concept there is, we want to make it known to the public what dollars will be and won't be coming in with the Intel project and other developments down there. So we're not specifically saying it's that property down there and how our tripartite agreement works and just how we have to earmark those dollars for the future growth. So as those dollars come in, really it's designed or anticipated to be steered toward capital expenses, additional buildings, additional classrooms, things of those nature. And then the growth that comes along with those, meaning in any type of increase in enrollment, the residents would be continuing the same tax rate. And really what our resolution, and we're going to work on some wording on it, but it's the concept of this board that the tax dollars brought in by those developments down there in the industrial or in the tripartite agreement area need to pay for themselves and future growth that come with it, and that our current residents of our school district will need to continue to pay their current school taxes, the levies. So we're trying to make it so everyone understands, and we earmark those dollars to not see any increases in the amount of school taxes needed by our residents. So we're trying to make sure that any agreement we have down there, those dollars get earmarked toward that. We will need our renewals. So the current taxes that we have out there for income tax and our what's deemed an emergency levy, because we can't change the wording on it, those types of things that will be coming up, we'll need renewals on those, but we will not be asking for any increases because we'll be earmarking those new dollars to cover those. So we're going to be working as a board to come up with a resolution that kind of puts that all together and then vote on that. So just for the public, that's what we're working on when we talk about the resolution. Does any other board member have any comment or concern or question on that?
I think you covered the monies needed for tax renewal. So renewal, not additional. That's going to get tricky.
Yeah, and that's our concern, is to make sure that the residents understand renewals will be needed. It's just additional taxes is what we're avoiding. And I think everyone up here knows that this board has taken our fiscal responsibility seriously since we've got on this board. I know personally that I've tried, with the goal of when I got on the board, felt like we should be able to go at least 20 years without any new additional taxes. So that's kind of the goal that we're going after. Whether or not we can get there, we feel like if we do these things right and that we're fiscally conservative and we earmark those dollars, that as long as we get the continued support of the community, there should be no need to ask for additional dollars. Time will tell, but that's our goal here, and that's why we want to work on a resolution to hold this board and future boards accountable to that. With that, Mr. Dixon, we'll get back to you on the proposed resolution that you have. Each individual board member received that in an email. If you've got grammatical type things or philosophical things that we want to put in there, just kind of spelling that out. And then at that time, we'll have our treasurer, Miss Pulley, present just some of the dollars and get out facts. We want to get out the facts of the issue we have as a board is there's a lot going on out there, but until we know what is being built, how many people are employed, we just know estimates. We can provide estimates, and that's what a lot of it'll be, because until actual people are hired and they're earning wages, paying wages, and the development itself, because we don't get any of the taxes off of the wages down there. We get through our tripartite agreement, we get reimbursed for the property value that gets waived. So as more buildings are built and fabrication units are brought on board, that raises the property value. Therefore, that's how the schools are funded. So as things are built is when dollars will start coming in. So from a school board standpoint, there are no additional dollars coming in until we actually see buildings going up and values increasing down there. So at this point, there is no change in our economic status for the school district.
And could you also explain that it goes beyond Intel? It's whoever locates in there. Could you explain that to them? Because we also are getting additional funding for existing buildings that are in our school district. So can you explain that to
Sure.
everybody?
Yeah. And the tripartite agreement is between us, New Albany Development, and whatever corporation moves in. And that's why I mentioned earlier, this resolution won't be an Intel resolution. It's a resolution for all companies that move in there. So from what we've heard, there's going to be a lot of support companies that come in that support the Intel property. So this will apply to those properties as well. So we have the tripartite agreement that we have reimburses us for a portion of the lost tax dollars down there through the tax abatement that they do receive. We receive some payments back from the city of New Albany through the agreement and the New Albany Development Corporation that tries to make us close to whole on all those, no more than whole, but as close to whole as we can get through those. So this tripartite agreement and the resolution will apply to any development within those 1,900 acres plus or minus, plus what already has been annexed that we see currently down there that we do receive some dollars from, such as Facebook and those organizations that have already occupied space down there.
Well done.
With that, Mr. Dixon, if you want to move on to your recommendations.
Yes, I know it's not typical for us to take a lot of action at work sessions, but there's some timely issues that would help us out by doing so tonight. So I have just a few items to bring before you this evening. Under superintendent's recommendations, I'd ask that you would approve items 5A through C. The first one would be to authorize the expenditure of $40,749.95 from the funds received in the Meta Facebook grant for the purchase of the ShopBot equipment, which I sent you information on prior to the meeting. Again, this is from totally funded out of grant dollars. It's an exceptional machine to allow our students to apply their knowledge that they're learning in the classrooms and actually produce items. So since it exceeds the $25,000 threshold for a single purchase, we wanted to bring that before the board as required. Under item B, to approve a service agreement with the Learning Spectrum as presented at a cost of $44,230. We do expect to see one more of these agreements come forth in the June meeting for a second child. And I've given you information prior to the meeting relative to this particular situation. Item C, to approve updated grading marks for standards-based grading K through 5 as presented. Those are the three general recommendations I have for you this evening.
Do we want to pull those out for separate votes, or do we want to have just an overall discussion?
I'd like to pull C out, please.
Okay. If I can get a motion for A and B,
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
discussion on A and B. I think the ed briefs were pretty clear on those as far as what we were doing there, utilizing the grant money that we received from Facebook to buy the ShopBot equipment, and the other one's the Learning Spectrum, which is an issue we've been working on to try to find spots. So any other questions or concerns on those two? With that, call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Yes. Mr. Swager?
Yes. If I can get a motion on item C,
I'll make the motion.
can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion.
This is not a first time we've read this concept or idea. I'm surprised we're seeing it now when it hasn't been on our agenda as of recent. I'm sure I bear the same feelings I had on this particular issue many years ago because it's been in the works a long time. I'm going to defer just for a minute because I want to know what the tenor of the board is. Does anybody else have any feelings about this?
So is this meaning that we would have secure needs improvement? Is that what standards-based grading is indicating for K through 5?
Basically, K through 3 would remain the same as it is now, the standards referenced grading system. When you get to grades 4 and 5, now that we're moving to an intermediate school concept, we felt it was time to provide a transition. Right now, we leave grade 5 at the elementary, we come to the middle school, and we go into letter grades. So this would allow, as presented in your briefs, that this would allow for there to be a transition. We still have the standards-based designations, grades 4 and 5, but there'd also be a letter equivalent put in on the final grade in each 9 weeks relative to the core courses. And the other thing this does is go into 4 different areas, K through 5, to match up with our learning progressions, the 4 areas. And I'd be happy to let our principals expand on any questions beyond that if
I
you
know
like.
that when we had, I can't even think what, Dim, you and I went to the curriculum meeting in, was it February of 2020? I don't know, something like that. Let's say it was that.
Yeah.
And we discussed about the grades, particularly that when the students get into junior high, that they are not, when they hit 6th grade, that's the first time that they're seeing a letter grade, and that's the first time mom and dad know that they are not up to what we recognize nationally as a letter grade. So they're very surprised at that, and I think we need to make sure that we're having a letter grade at the 4th and 5th grade level.
And that's what this is meant to do, is get a little transitioning so you're not coming cold right out of standard reference and go right
So
into it.
on the report card, it would have a letter grade on it.
Yes,
You're saying
you'll
it's a
see
hybrid?
you would see 4 indicators, basically 1 through 4. You'll have the as we all know, the good thing about standards reference grading, it tells us more about what the children know. I, as a parent, can look at that and say, well, I know I need to work on these math concepts or these reading concepts. And so it tells me more than just seeing a letter. Because what's a grade? What's a
Well,
grade?
I would disagree because as a parent, when I looked at that, it didn't help me to know that my child was struggling. So when she got to junior high, it was a complete surprise to us that she was struggling.
Well, I think with what was sent over, as a parent who gets report cards now, it looks like what would be happening in 4 and 5 is it's adding one more category, which I think is great because we have secure, right? They got it. And we have developing. And as a parent, you're like, oh, that could be a wide range. And so with the new proposal, there's something sort of an intermediate between the two. Am I correct? And so I like that because you can see, are they on sort of the lower end of developing versus closer to secure? So I do think it gives you a little more indicator of if there's closer to the secure end or the limited end versus right now, it's kind of a big area. So to me, letter grade or not, I do like that it adds one more component in, which I think just it specifies a little bit better where your child is.
I think the letter grade specifies where your child is more than the developing. But as long as the letter grade's on there, I'm fine.
So that one proposed here has 4. It's got mastery, approaching. Is that what we're talking about? And then it's got developing and limited, I think it is. Or,
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go
Set
ahead.
up-
And I didn't
yeah.
know, how does the grade relate? Like, is is it A, B, C, D? Is that an equal?
So there are 2 parts to this. And the first part is what K through 5 will share, which is the 4 marks. And as Mr. Dixon said, they correlate to the work that we've done with all of our learning progressions. And so it's very descriptive in that the mastery says, yes, they have mastered the grade level standard. The approaching mastery says that they've got the foundational information, but they still need help with the actual grade level material. Whereas the developing now says that they are still working on the foundational skills. And then limited is even with help, they're still not quite at the foundational skills. So that will be consistent K through 5. But the intermediate school would like to then do an overall traditional letter grade for the core classes, for the 4 core classes, or 5, if you include language arts separately from reading. So what would happen is students would see and parents would see on the grade card reading at the top of the traditional letter grade underneath the essential skills and where they are with the standards referenced as far as are they mastering this particular part of reading or are they still developing this particular part of reading. So the traditional letter grade will be averaged, but it will be averaged from, and we haven't chosen this number yet, so many, the last, say, 3 or 5 marks that the student had, because we don't want to completely go away from the standards-based grading concept of if a student takes a test on something in September and they practice and work, and by December they have mastered it, don't know that it's really fair to average in the September grade. So we're going to determine what number of grades will be averaged into that traditional mark. But there will be a traditional grade for reading, language arts, math, social studies, and science.
Would that be at each 9 weeks or just half? Did I miss that?
Each 9 weeks.
Each 9 weeks. Okay.
Chris, do you currently give a letter grade in middle school? I think I know the answer, but I want to know. Thank you.
Need to come up.
We do all letter grades at the middle school. What I like about the transition piece is it helps move parents into that. So often we laugh because we'll have parents call us after the first 9 weeks and say, my child was a straight A student until they got to 6th grade. We're like, well, they weren't, because there were no letter grades before 6th grade. So it kind of gives them a better understanding of grade, if that makes sense.
Yeah, don't we, I assume we give minuses and pluses so we know if we're strong.
We do.
Or if we're not so strong.
We do.
So
And as a parent, I would tell you that more so than the letters, I'm more concerned by the teacher comments on that report card.
Absolutely.
Because teachers can put anything they want on there that's going to give you lots of information about why the letter grade is what it is.
I guess I assumed they were already doing that when they issue a letter grade.
They do.
Already give that background so you know whether your child is doing well, or are they a B minus, and where are they weak, and what can we do to make them a B or B plus?
Right. And I'm just saying that
unrealistic?
sometimes those parent comments explain that even more for a parent, so it helps them understand that. And I think it's better now too, because unlike the way it used to be, parents can access grades anytime, any day of the week. So they can see exactly where their students are at all the grade levels through Progress Book, and what needs to be done. If there's work missing, things outstanding.
It's hard for me to pull away from the traditional. I wouldn't be opposed to a 1-year look at this, but I've not seen it work, and I don't know how the parents are really going to receive this, because I've not heard any comments. They don't know it. So, but if it doesn't go well,
I just want to clarify, we haven't had traditional before. This is a step to put traditional letter grades back in so that we truly can be the transition from elementary to middle. So they will
I
see
hear
what
you.
they saw before, which are the marks that are standards reference, but now they will also see a traditional letter grade so that they can begin to make that transition to middle school. So we're not removing anything, we're actually adding.
I got that.
Okay.
I got that. I don't think I explained myself very well, but I got what you said. I got that we were doing that. Well, it's a big change.
Yeah, I guess we're currently going K5 without any letter grades. This will make it K3, and then we'll have letter grades in 4, 5. So it's a move that I think
It was really
Bridges
in
the gap a little
response
bit.
to what we have heard over the
Yeah.
years here about needing that transition that we bring this before you so we can get it in the handbooks. Because we've already approved the old grade scale in the handbooks. We want to get that corrected before it goes out.
Well, and we do have, then when we go to middle school, we have letter grade, and then high school, we have letter grade. You go to college, it's a letter grade. So, and this may work well. I just like to see all sides of it, so. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not just eager either, so.
that's what I like it. Yep. Yes.
I like letter grades.
Yes.
Back into it, right.
Yeah.
I know that, but and it would appear that it's really even going to be a little more work for the teachers, to be honest, because they're going to have to put more comments in there. Am I understanding that correctly? No. Okay. Okay. To do that. Right.
Okay. Can you call the roll?
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Fluor,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swagger.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks for the understanding.
Under personnel, I have a few items for you so that we may move forward with our staffing for next year. Under item 6A, asking you to accept the resignation from Lindsay Bevere as high school secretary, and we thank her for her service. Under item B, to accept the resignation of Josh Herb as varsity wrestling coach. Excuse me. Under item item C, to accept the resignation of Josh Clark as middle school wrestling coach. Under item D, to approve a limited contract for Beth Whistler, and this is based on Ohio Revised Code and the number of days she served as a substitute within our district. We must award a contract to finish out the year. Under item E, to approve the pupil activity positions as listed, which is one, Chip Wall to serve as a varsity girls soccer coach. Those are the personnel items we'd like to bring before you this evening.
If I can get a motion, please.
I'll motion.
A second.
Discussion.
Yes, I'd like to start with B and C, and that we're losing some coaches in a given area. I thought at the last meeting we were going to discuss those and determine the ultimate focus of the program. And are we still doing that? I mean, that's fine to accept the resignation. I'm just
Can
curious,
Robbie,
is that to follow?
And to piggyback off of that, are these just the standard end of the year contract ones, or are they
Yeah.
intending to come back?
Are we on here?
Yeah.
So these two coaches have decided to not come back for the 22-23 wrestling season. So that is, I guess, interesting timing. That has no bearing on the topic, I guess, of what we were going to decide
Okay.
for the upcoming year. These are just two coaches that have decided to not continue.
Okay. So we'll continue on with our discussion.
So
And
the
yes,
board would-
yeah,
Yes, you'll be bringing data to determine our direction
Yeah,
next meeting.
sure, absolutely. I have some of that prepared for tonight, the financial end of the wrestling program, but I don't know what all else is needed.
Okay.
Point being, I wasn't going to post these following resignation from my notes in your ed briefs. I certainly wouldn't post these. I just felt further discussion might be necessary given the data we received at the last meeting.
yeah, that's correct.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on the
Just
Other
a
items?
question on item E. I'm not sure that I know the numbers. I know you did a quick overview and I've got them at home, but what were the numbers in girls soccer? Just,
Are you referring to like the participation numbers?
yes.
This
Tim
most
has
recent,
it. Sorry, he has it.
most recent season we had 22, which is a pretty tough number for having two soccer teams. You play 11 at a time. So when I'm talking, 22 is tough when you've got, if you're trying to play varsity and JV. So we went into last season expecting to play much more JV games than we actually ended up playing, and we couldn't really play anything outside of a scrimmage, both levels on the same day. So we did end up playing a few scrimmages, and off the top of my head, maybe 10 JV games when a normal season is 17, but all of those had to be separate days than a varsity game. So we'll see what the numbers look like for this year, but we are probably looking for the varsity girls soccer program going into it, planning like we'll have one team and one varsity coach. And if these first few workouts and the turnout looks a little bit better, then we can look at doing the opposite of what I did last year.
Sure.
I hated having a bunch of JV games that we then had to either cancel or move dates. So I'm kind of doing the opposite of that this year.
And if I look at this chart, right, we have 3 graduating seniors that played this year. So
Yes, sir.
if we get
Yeah, so
more
there's-
than 3
yeah,
coming up, then
absolutely.
we'll have
So
hopefully a
there's
larger.
very much a chance.
Okay.
But in a perfect world, you still would have more than 24 or 25. So that's some decisions that need to be
Yeah.
made.
It looks like our
based-
high was only 27 in the last 6 years. So it's been close to that number regularly.
But with soccer, you can play 3 halves.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, so it's not an absolute, like you play a varsity game, you can play a half
Right.
in a JV game. So there's some flexibility from a coaching standpoint where you really get into trouble if there's injuries or illness. Or something.
Exactly. And that 22 number was, from August,
Right.
before we maybe had a couple injuries and COVID case here or there.
So what we're saying is current 8th grade girls and moving up, if you're interested in soccer, make
That's
sure you're-
absolutely what I'm
make sure
saying. We
you're-
made a post about, I made an email about that just the other day. We are having a program, a high school girls soccer meeting tomorrow. I know it's tough timing because a lot of 8th graders are on a trip right now, but we really wanted to get it done before the end of the school year. So anyone watching, please send me an email if you're interested in playing girls soccer, if your daughter's interested in playing and was a part of the program, if you were not a part of the program, especially last year.
You're still looking at data on the other programs to see where we should enhance programs or take away and become club sports.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
And I appreciate the board's consideration tonight. Again, we typically don't bring these at work sessions, but given the circumstances and the timing of finding this candidate to recommend, we wanted to take advantage of these next 2 weeks to get the program rolling.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Yes. Mr. Swager?
Yes, motion carries. Did we have any, I think I skipped any public comment.
We did.
And that's why I asked. Mr. Thomas, you're up.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Alan Thomas. I came here to Johnstown in 2016 after I retired from the military.
Yeah, if you could pull the mic down, it's
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Trying to make this my retirement place. And I always wanted to come back to a local community, be part of that community. I work for Licking Memorial Hospital. As you can tell by my scrubs, I came here straight from work, downtown urgent care. And I also volunteer as a football coach for Mike Carter. So I'll go see you on the sidelines Friday nights during football season. And we're going to a Woo camp here next month. So I do want to be a part of the community. Back in August, I brought some stuff in front of the board and Mr. Dixon pertaining to a specific book that was being passed out to our kids for book reports. And we We revisited that issue with Mr. Dixon in January, and there were some policy things that were being discussed and worked out at that time. And I'm glad to announce that I believe that book has been pulled. Is that right, Mr. Dixon?
Yes, it is.
And apparently there was a second book that was found as well. Hoping that would, and I believe if the board remembers correctly, I had mentioned that there's probably other books out there that shouldn't be out there. And we need to scrub and look for those books and get them out of here so that our kids aren't exposed to that kind of material. Well, unfortunately, we're 8 months later, and there is another series of books that's being exposed. Our kids are being exposed to. Now, that particular book was not in the public library of the school. It was in a teacher's personal library. However, this particular book is actually in our public library. And not only is it this book, and just to be clear, I didn't go into every book, okay? But there's a whole series of these books. The book that I looked at was called A Court of Mist and Fury. The author's name is Sarah Maas, M-A-A-S. But this book that I found was part of a series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Wings and Ruin. And there was another, I wrote it down on this sheet here. It is. A Court of Silver Flames. Okay, there's 3 other books out there in this series that are untitled at this time. So when I was researching this book and the information pertaining to this book, I found some quotes online about how wonderful this book was. If you look at the back of this book, it'll tell you that it's a New York Times bestseller, just like that other book was, and how great it was and fantastic. But when you actually get in and read some of the material in this book, and you find out that it's in your school library, you realize that this book didn't really ever make it through the court of decency, didn't make it through the court of common sense. And if our kids were caught with this book on this campus, brought on this campus from somewhere else, then we would probably all be going to the court of law for it. Okay, our kids would be expelled, they'd be in trouble. If they had taken this book and were reading it to some friends at lunch, and let's say Ms. Almendinger overhears this material, there's probably going to be some suspensions and some detentions and those kinds of things, or Mr. Lucifer, either way, and rightly so, because this book is not a decent book. Now, I'm not going to read from this book for anybody, and I'm certainly not going to do it here in public, because you wouldn't let me get past the first 2 or 3 sentences. But what I am going to do, all right, guys, is I'm going to pass out
Okay, thanks, Zach.
a few snippets that I clipped out of this book. I found these on page 55. I found these in chapter 55 online, and I didn't really need to go any deeper. It's pretty disgusting, and again, just like that other book,
Thank you.
just like that other book that I brought up, you don't have to read very far to find out. I'm sorry. You can read that at your displeasure. So I asked for a copy of the books that are in our public library at our high school because I wanted to find out if this book was there. Not only is this book there, but most of the books in that series are there. So here's this is the printout that I got from Mr. Dixon today about the inventory in our library. And all these books I'm going to talk about are from this same author. So if she's writing this material in one book, you can bet there's some of this same material in all the rest of her books. It was the same with that other guy that we talked about. Both of his books had this inappropriate material. So I mentioned the Court series, but there's Air and Fire, Kingdom of Ash, Throne of Glass, Tower of Dawn. So that's 9 books that this lady's written that are in our public library. And that's the kind of material you're getting from. So, it's been 8 months, right? And I brought this other book up 8 months ago, and now I found this book. So I found 2 books, and when you add these others, it could be potentially 11 books that I found in 8 months, not even looking for these books. This came to me out of the blue. It was an assignment my daughter had 8 months ago. She was having trouble working on the assignment. She didn't quite understand the book, put the information on the questions that were being asked from her English teacher. So my wife tried to help her, and we found out what was in this book. I wasn't looking for this book either, but it's out there. So if I can find 11 books in 8 months, I just wonder what we could find if we really put our hands together and started looking for this garbage and get it out of here. So here's what I think we should do. I think we should, in the military, we used to call it a GI party. The NCOs would all go down to the barracks. They'd do an inspection. Barracks wasn't up to snuff. They pull all the soldiers out of their rooms. We have a big party. They clean the barracks. They get the filth out of there until it meets the NCO standard. Well, I think maybe we should do a little GI party here called a book cleaning party. Maybe the staff, faculty, administration, I don't care who it takes. Go through all these books, find out where this garbage is and get rid of it, and clear this school district of this filth. This is pornographic material. The only reason, I'm sorry, this is obscene material. The only reason it's not pornographic is because there's no pictures in the book. But you can draw a picture in your mind based on that information you're looking at right there. Pretty distinct and disgusting. Okay? The other thing I would like to see happen is I would like to see our attorney contact the Ohio State Board of Education and file a lawsuit against this author and their publishing company because they're doing it in Virginia and they're getting away with it. They're getting success with it. I've got some information here about where this is. This is a snippet I found on the internet. It says, battle over books in Virginia Beach now targets Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It's making its way through the circuit court. Here's what it says. At a request of a congressional candidate, a Virginia Beach Circuit Court judge has found probable cause that 2 books that can be found in school libraries in the city are obscene. Now the candidate is asking the court to restrict access to the books in privately owned bookstores. If you go on and read the article, it talks about how a motion for a temporary restraining order to prohibit selling or lending either title to minors was filed with the Circuit Court Wednesday for a court of mist and fury. The motion state requests stopping the sale or distribution to minors to any person who publishes, sells, rents, lends, transports, or interstate commerce or commercially distributes or exhibits the book. So it's making its way through the court in Virginia. I think we need to do that here in Ohio. This is the heart of it all. Well, we need to be the tip of the spear, too. We're going to be the heart of it all and get this crap out of our schools. There's one other point I wanted to make. Based on Ohio statute, we are in violation of distributing obscenity to minors. If I can find it. I'm sure our attorney could probably tell me what I did with it. Oh, wait. Give me just a sec. That's not it. It's on here. Well, anyway. Oh, here it is. Ohio Revised Code, section 2907.321. Pandering obscenity involving a minor or impaired person. No person with knowledge of the character of the material or performance involved shall do any of the following: create, reproduce, or publish, promote, or advertise, create, direct, or produce, advertise, promote, buy, procure, possess, or control any obscene material that has a minor or impaired person as one of its participants. So we're in violation, guys. We got to get ourselves straight. We need to do what I used to call tighten up our shot group on this. Right? I mean, you got a whole big company coming here. Lots of Intel and all these other companies and stuff. What are they going to think of our school district if we're letting this kind of crap go on? That's all I have. If anybody has any questions on me, all this information is free on the internet. You can find it easily. I literally worked today, so I didn't have, between patients, I had time to find all this. So with just a little bit of effort, I was able to uncover this. If you'd like, Mr. Dixon, I can give you a copy of the books that are in your library at the high school. I don't know if they're at the middle school or the junior. I didn't get a chance to scrub those libraries. But again, I found 11 books in 8 months, not even looking for. So I think we should start looking.
Mr. Thomas, thank you for bringing this in. We do have, under our policies, a process and procedure to file a disagreement on materials within the schools. I'll make sure you get copies of that so we can take this through the proper due process. And we can certainly involve our attorneys. This has been an ongoing discussion with the board and administration over this past year, as you've articulated, and it needs to continue.
I think we're going about it backwards, though.
I do too.
I think what we need to do is we need to find these books and get them off our shelves and then figure out if they can come back in. Not leave them there until we get some policy straight. That's what I believe. And I believe our attorney would probably agree with that.
So that's where we have to be careful, and we have been consulting with our attorneys on these issues, and we have to. There's a certain policy, certain procedure we have to follow.
But this is a strict policy right here that says we're violating.
Okay.
Is it not?
Actually, we got an opinion on that Mr. Dixon will be happy to share if we get that far. But on the obscene material, it is, schools have certain leeway that I don't necessarily agree with, but and then on the obscene, on the minor, it applies to the character in the book, and a lot of these books don't give an age of the character. Again, wholeheartedly against this, but that's some of the legal stuff that we've been getting back about some of the reasons that some of these can't just be in violation of the ORC. That doesn't mean it's not in violation of our community standards and our community expectations. That's a different conversation.
Well, I just don't think that our school should be distributing information to our kids that they couldn't bring into the school.
Wouldn't disagree with you on that at all.
And that they couldn't stand up there and read to the crowd.
I couldn't read that.
You could not read that. I know that.
You couldn't read this.
Couldn't.
You couldn't read the first two sentences or
Isn't
the
there
third or the
such
fourth.
Isn't there such a thing that we all know each other in this room? Isn't there something we can do to band together and say, how do we think we could fix it? I'm not talking about the legal thing, and I'm not talking about banning a book. I'm just talking about looking at a book, reading a book, having working knowledge of what the contents of the book would be, and deciding whether you want to be the teacher that would distribute that. That tells us something about where we are. Everybody has a difference of opinion. Mine isn't necessarily right, but I'd surely like to know, especially on this book right here. If we had a group together and 10 of them said this book's appropriate, I'm in the wrong place. So I'd like to see how we might look to ourselves and say, how could we, your principals, superintendents, etc., we have a host of years of qualifications that make you the right people for the job. We never get a chance to talk to you to tell you that, but when parents get a hold of this stuff, it's not going to be easy, and they're going to go right here with blame. And I don't blame them, because that's where I would go. We are the recipient, the voice of the people. So I'm asking you for help from you, because you are the educators, and you have all the experience in the world to determine whether something can be right or wrong for our district. But we can't go on in another 8 months and find another 10 books, but we can't do anything about it because an attorney says, well, you can't do whatever. Let's find out what we can do. I like can do within the limits. I understand the law, but I also, let's see what we can do within the law. So we need to be on guard. I don't know. What do we do?
I would just have one last comment. I understand that there are probably, possibly, a parent out there, 2 or 5 or 20, that would say that it's okay for their kids to see that material. But I stand up for the majority of the people in this community, not the minority, the majority. And I think we need to start paying more attention to the majority instead of the minority. That's all.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Alan.
Appreciate that. I do know we've discussed this ad nauseum at the board level about starting a curriculum committee or a review committee. How does that work? And then obviously the daunting task of going through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of books, and how does that start and where do you start? That's the challenge. Do you start at that end of the bookshelf and start reading every book and going down to the next bookshelf, or do you look for authors that we know are problematic or at least controversial? That's the part of the challenge. Or do you work on what's new coming in?
Any
Teachers
book
I
coming
think
in must
any new
be
book coming in.
agreed on the new books. I think we all came to agreement on that. It's the existing ones, as none of these would be caught under under the proposed process. Not a single one of these would have been found because they're not new.
Tim, are they covered by the genre?
Nope.
The books aren't covered by the genre.
That's the challenge we have. Someone would have to enter in every book that we currently own into that program. I'm asking. I'm
And I'm not looking for a dictate. I just want us to have something, a beginning.
I think you almost have to take, I mean, there's a little bit of a pattern here of year that you can see. And you can do a search on that and start like at this time, see that, I think it's when the electronic book readers came out, they needed more material to add in there. And so there's all of this unvetted, unedited material really that's out there. So you could go by a year that the Kindles and Nooks came out and then filter that way. That's what I think. I don't know.
I mean, electronically, we don't have any of our books electronically. We have titles in that, but not like content of the book. So we can't search through it that way. We could search by title or author, but you'd have to know what you're looking for.
Yes, and there are summaries and codes with the books for age appropriateness, etc. That
yeah,
you
and that's where we
sometimes
have
have
the
to take with
issue.
a grain
Right,
of salt.
right.
But as is the case here, so what we have currently in place is when there's an objection to a book, it's form, it's filed, there's a review committee, and then in the meantime we pull the book off the shelf while it's being considered. Decision is made. That's not to say that once a decision is made, somebody else might not challenge that decision, and then you start that whole process because it becomes, from what legal authorities share with me, a censorship issue in a public school district. And I can wholeheartedly agree this has no place in schools. That's my personal opinion. Okay. Where I'm cautioning the board is we have to be careful about going through and picking and choosing because we each have different value sets to choose from. There is no question this shouldn't be on our shelves. So when it comes to our attention, we take action like we did back mid-year. That's not to say you're not going to have somebody rise up legally and come against your school district for doing that. That's the delicate balance you want to be cognizant of going forward.
I'm pretty comfortable on these ones that are grossly obscene that I don't think we'll have much pushback from anybody I
hope
know.
not.
But agreed on some other books, it may be more of a gray area, but based on the two examples I've been given, I would believe that the other 9 are along those similar lines. The challenge comes, how many books do we have that's
Thousands. So
Yeah,
I've got, like I said, we quickly gave an inventory. You all have copies of the inventory we put out mid-year in each of our three buildings, and soon to be moving some over and getting our JIS established. So I am certainly not opposed to screening where you can. We need to do that alongside our best legal advice going forward because we are in a public school district here. And we need to respect the views of a myriad of people.
There is a year, I believe there was a year on the spreadsheet. The there was a year, so I would sort on the year as a filter first.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think it started with when the electronic readers came out. Unvetted. Not that we have electronic readers here, but that's the contents changed because they needed so many books.
Would the librarian not, as, I don't have the data. How many books do we buy a year per library? Is it hundreds, thousands? I don't know how many books we buy.
I'd have to check that against our
Could we check that?
purchase
Have that in
list.
front of us?
Yeah.
And then secondly, how difficult would it be on just the new books, just starting today? There's always a beginning. So if we start today with any new books that are being brought into this district that we know it's a good book, a safe book, and doesn't start out like this. And then grow from there. I don't know where it grows, how it grows. We have to know what our date is.
And that's the challenge that's been identified tonight. How do you start and go back with everything that's been accumulated for decades in
I know.
a school district to review?
But it doesn't daunt my spirit that there's a
Right.
beginning. I agree with you.
I'm sure there are books from the 30s and 40s that people would argue don't belong on our shelves.
I think we've heard some of those
And-
when we moved.
So we could go in a lot of different directions here. That's where I'm just being cautious. That's why we have a procedure for complaints to come in that we follow. And I certainly respect your comments, Alan. I do believe you represent the majority opinion. You know where I stand on this. It's just that we have to be cognizant of the big picture here in a public school district and make sure we don't put ourselves behind the 8 ball legally as a school district.
As is clearly stated.
Great. Appreciate it. Good conversation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Alan. Thank you.
So are we going to do anything about it?
Would you like to make a motion on something?
Do you have the list?
That is the list Dale's going to get and start the process, the current policy process for the 11 books.
I'd like to have
I'll
a
just give it to
fair
Dale.
policy that any new books purchased for the next school year are reviewed before purchase. That they have that if the librarian is the purchaser, that she has a
Thank you.
working
Thank
knowledge. She doesn't have to know the whole book, but a working knowledge of that book and checking it through the internet, looking for the keywords and phrases. Because somehow we have to start. I don't know. how
Talking
else
on
we
all
do it.
new books or
On
just
any
every
new
book?
Any new book.
So without knowing that number, what if it's 2,000 books a year?
Then we better get some help to
That's-
review it.
That's what I'm asking.
Well,
Because when we reach out to like the Worthington Library and that, it is hundreds of books. It's not, that's what I personally, I don't think one librarian has any.
no, but I don't know how many. So I'm just saying that
Yes.
was a methodology. Then I'm looking for, okay, how many people do we need to look over these books? Will it take 10 people 2 weeks or will it take 20 people 1 week? I don't know, but we don't ever start. Too often, I've seen that we start something and we have great intentions, but we don't set up a mechanism and we don't follow through because we're afraid of the attorney or afraid of whatever. I'm not afraid.
I think there's a whole lot to this issue relative to what you're looking for. What is the criteria for
This is what I'm
obscenity?
looking for, right?
I get that, but I'm saying where is the line drawn? And so that's where I would highly suggest that we talk to our school district's attorney, maybe to look at a framework from which we can approach this, and what parameters are out there given current court cases and the history, just so we proceed cautiously. That'd be my recommendation to the board.
Could we do that then? And I'll be happy if we do something like that and say we're going to do it and do it. Because we've said we're going to do it and haven't done it. So
I think we need to do something. I have no problem reading books. I'm an avid reader. I'll take the books.
So she.
And I'm sure there's other people that would volunteer to read books. But
Okay.
this, I can tell you, should never be in our schools. Never. Never.
What I'd like to do is define for the board. And I'd agree with you, Alan. If we focus purely on obscenity, that's a nice place to start. That way we get away from all the other topics and focus on obscenity, and maybe we come up with, I don't know who's typing this list, but somebody gets to type the list of words that are, red flag words
Yes.
that we would like to search for. Not saying that if a book contains one of those, it'd be automatic. It's just that would flag that book if we start with obscenities first.
I would call the Virginia School District and find out how they started. Because they're massive.
Their state department's handling that, not the local.
Well,
That's
wouldn't that be a good place? Their state department. So what did you do and how do you do it?
Right.
And that certainly gives us a legal basis, although it would be different in each state, but still. I just don't want us to overlook it and say, well, yeah, there was another meeting. We talked about that. So I doubt it.
Yeah, would it be possible to have the librarians come to the next board meeting to discuss their processes? Because I just don't know it.
I can ask
I think
if they could come to the June board meeting,
what?
but they're not.
Well,
We only have one media specialist in
Well,
the district.
Does a
Yeah.
parapro order books? Does
Still
she
responsible
determine
for it.
content? Yeah. Okay. But she could reject them.
That's-
I mean, just because an organization says these are the ones you could use, if she perused those books, she could say,
No,
no,
No.
no, no.
no.
And we know that, but how do we get, I know there are cautions, but at what point?
How do you
we say,
start?
Let's start.
Start somewhere.
We're
And,
just saying,
and it could be,
well,
They'll never start anything.
they'll never start.
I just,
it.
you know.
You
No.
have to.
but there,
If it has any of these words in it, any of this language, that's where we start. That's real simple. And if there is a mechanism, a software that will identify these in a book, perfect.
but there is a process whereby anybody can read our books. It could be a self-appointed committee, coming in to, take a look at our books and use the process that we have in place to file the complaint against the books on a case-by-case basis. I mean, this is a start, right? This is a start.
That's extra.
But there is a process in policy to take care of these issues when community or parents disagree with the content of a book.
Well, I think it needs to be global.
I think it'd be helpful for us.
It would,
I don't know anything about the Junior Library Guild and how they choose their books.
and the more we grow,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I absolutely.
I agree.
Please do. Yeah, those types of things. We'll put together a little list. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be helpful. Yep. I mean, I don't know what the Junior Library Guild is and how they choose their books. So that's what, yeah.
If we take these questions to Alicia, perhaps, and we can invite her to come and present on those issues.
Alan, is there a date on this, when it arrived in our library, when we purchased this? You had a spreadsheet. Okay.
It's just a partial of the list. It doesn't have much on it. It's a blown up copy.
That's all right.
But we can find that. Everything's cataloged on each book.
But I don't want to add to the complexity of the problem, but the problem goes beyond the library, right? You have personal libraries for our teachers, and how do we address that? Because that's where we ran into the problem before. Was not.
That was actually a book that came from a public library ordered in. Derek, would you take the mic and clarify that, please?
I just want to clarify for the record that book we had addressed before in executive session, that was not in a personal library of a teacher. That was made available through the public library, I believe, from Worthington. That was arranged through the teacher, but not like on.
It wasn't
that,
in the library itself. It was in her library in her classroom. Right?
It wasn't in her library.
It was in the
They got
Worthington Public Library, and it fit the genre of the book they were researching. So it was not her personal copy in a library she keeps in her room, which she has.
Okay.
That book actually was checked out from the Worthington.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
was
I actually had to
confused.
return it so that she could avoid late fees because it needed to be returned.
So the teacher identified the genre or the issue for the project. The library identified books that would be suitable to that age group. And in that library list that came out, the book that should not have come here came out.
And I think that'll be a good question for Alicia Doty on that is if a teacher does a project, does it go through her always? I don't know. So those are some of the protocols we should probably ask about and put in place.
Right.
So, okay. I'll be happy to put up my questions if everyone else would just email me theirs and I'll combine it into one document and forward it on to Mr.
Sure,
Dixon.
Tim, we'll get her taken care of.
Appreciate it. Thanks again, Alan.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, anyone else have anything? I got a 5-minute executive session.
You say that.
It's 5 minutes for me. It's what everyone else does with it. Anything else?
And expected action, and what's the purpose of the exec session?
We don't know. about that.
Compensation, employee compensation, and perhaps
We don't know who that is.
perhaps action. Don't know.
Okay.
I hate to pin it down.
If I can get a motion or
So moved.
second.
Second.
Call the roll. What are we at? 6:10.
6:10. Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes. We'll move to executive. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't hurt. So often we're not.
So are we out at 6:32? Yep. $6:32.
Out of executive session, 6:32. At this time, provided the treasurer with the administrative salaries that'll go on to the next board meeting to talk about for approval. She'll have those on the agenda. And then does anyone else have any other topics of conversation? With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas? Yes. Mr. Swanger?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.